It's finally time to rank the Sternritters. So I've deliberated on this list endlessly now. I've gone backwards and forwards on it, I've moved people around, and I think I'm finally there. I think I'm at a place where I'm sort of happy with the list I've got. And when I say sort of, it's because the characters on the list, their powers are just so weird. The Sternritters have this collection of abilities that range from completely situational to just totally vague to absurdly overpowered, and it makes ranking them from the weakest to the strongest surprisingly difficult. However, I am at a place with it now where I am pretty happy to show it to you guys, and I'll be interested to see if you agree with my placements. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping points. I've not included Yuha himself, as to me he's not a Sternritter, he's the Emperor of the Wandenreich, and let's face it, he'd be number one. Also, for my own clarity's sake, I haven't included either of Gremmy's creations, so there's no Shaz Domino and there's no Gwenael Lee, but every other Sternritter is totally fair game. As you've probably already seen from the thumbnail, this video is going to focus on Sternritters 27 through to number 11. There's going to be a top 10 video coming out next, but I just wanted to do this for my sanity and for yours, as I think this is going to be a pretty long video as it is, so you might want to grab a drink and settle in, because it is going to be a lengthy one. Like I said, if you don't agree with this list, guys, please let me know your own in the comments. I'm always fascinated to see what you guys think, to see where you'd rank characters, and to see how similar we are, if at all. And if you haven't subscribed, if you've just found this video and you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, because if you love Bleach, you are in the right place. By supporting me, I can continue to support Bleach and bring you guys videos, and we can just keep that momentum going until the anime finally returns. But without further ado, what say we just get going with this list? Because like I said, it's going to be quite long. So, the last place on our list is number 27. And for me, the bottom Sternritter was always going to be one of probably two characters, and you might already be able to guess who they are. These characters have the dubious honour of being the only characters in the series that I can think of to be introduced when they are already dead. So, last place on our list then, number 27. Number 27 is Sternritter Q the Question Berenice Gabrielli. We know next to nothing about this character. Like I said, she is introduced to us already dead. Kenpachi has killed 3 Sternritters and dumped them at the feet of Hashwolf and Yuha, and Berenice is one of them. And to me, out of the 3 of them, she's the least impressive sounding. We don't find out anything about her ability apart from vague hints from Kenpachi himself. He mentions that she started talking and trying to get him to question himself, but being in the vicinity of her teammate Jerome, his roar drowned out her ability and Kenpachi just took her throat out. This tells me a couple of things. It tells me that the question is kind of useless because it's very situational. If there's kind of any noise, any loud noise, it seems like it might be useless. It seems like it might be similar to Rose's powers, where if you cover your ears or something, you're not going to be affected. Not only that, but Berenice is clearly not particularly sturdy. Kenpachi appears to just rip her throat out and kill her in one hit. So that's also quite embarrassing. But I think the main factor for her being at the bottom, A, we know nothing about her, B, she dies immediately, and C, her ability is rendered utterly useless just by being in the vicinity of another Sternritter, which causes her to die. So yeah, that's not a great start for the Sternritters, and I think Berenice deserves her spot at the bottom of the list. Alright, so number 26 on the list then is, as you might have guessed, Berenice's partner in crime, Sternritter R, Jerome Guisbat the Raw. Now, Jerome always kind of interested me. I remember seeing him on Kenpachi's shoulder and thinking, like, that guy is not human. Because, in fact, Jerome can actually turn into a big ape-like monster and then emit a sonic roar. The roar is powerful enough to pop the heads of some nearby regular foot soldier Shinigami, but frankly, Jerome just screams giant fodder to me. He's another one of these characters that comes up against Kenpachi, is larger than life, and Kenpachi just cuts him in half. And it's something we've seen before with Tesla and Giriko. It's impossible to say how well Jerome's roar would work against any other Shinigami, but I don't think it's really going to have the power to fight a captain level opponent. Jerome's transformation might be kind of unique and cool, but Kenpachi cuts through him like butter, and he goes down almost just as easily as Berenice. Next on our list is Sternritter W, the Wind Nyanzol Weasel? I don't know how to pronounce it. Now, I'll be honest, at first I had kind of high hopes for this guy. He's the first Sternritter outside of the big trinity of Yuha, Hashwolf and Uryu to step foot in the Royal Palace, and I thought his intro, where he rises up from the shadow, was actually really well done. Unfortunately, it was mostly downhill from there. So this character's ability is the Wind, and essentially he can make things bend away from himself, which is kind of creative. Everything about this character is focused on that ability, right down to his design. He has 2 tongues because of the whole tongue twister thing. He can't speak very well. It's all to do with being wound up, winding around things. But unfortunately, it just doesn't make for that interesting or powerful a character. Nyanzal is able to use his ability fairly creatively to help defend Yuha and also to cut down a couple of the divine soldiers. But Yuha himself says that his Soldat could also deal with those soldiers, meaning they're only really average Shinigami level strength. Nyanzal is then one-shot by Senjumaru, and I appreciate that Senjumaru is a Royal Guard member, but Nyanzal clearly talks a little bit too much and completely gives the game away, while leaving himself totally open to an attack. It's pretty amateurish, and I kind of expected better from the Sternritter that Yuha brought with him to the palace, but I think that also speaks volumes. Nyanzal is clearly only there because his ability is conveniently incredibly defensive. He's able to bend people away from himself, and although he manages to quite cleverly use his ability to kill a few soldiers, I don't ever see it being useful against anyone remotely powerful. Next up is Sternritter U, the Underbelly Nananana, or as I like to call him, the off-screen Sternritter. This guy is really weird. You know, he's in this series a really long time. He comes in around 495, I think. He's the first Sternritter to get a name on screen, and he lasts all the way until Basby betrays him. And in fact, he's in Can't Fear Your Own World as well for some reason. But he just doesn't do anything. This guy does everything this guy does of note is off-screen. He first fights Rose, off-screen. He then threatens to defeat Renji, that never happens. And then he kind of comes in, and Ichigo, he basically attempts to attack Ichigo like this, misses, and then the last time you see him, he gets shot in the back. However, he does one thing of note, which is the thing that's stopping him from being last on this list. He uses his underbelly to paralyze Aizen, of all people, for 5 minutes. That's pretty impressive. I don't really like Nanana's underbelly ability. I think it's pretty much useless. I think it's very telling that the only person he hits with it is strapped to a chair and can't move. I think that speaks volumes about the underbelly's use in an actual battle. The fact that Nanana has to observe his opponents first, and then he seems to actually have to hit them with it, and then calculate their Reiatsu. Way too much going on. It's a really, really weird power, and I just don't think it's that practical. So yeah, I think there's not a whole lot to say about Nanana. Now, number 23 on this list, I think, is probably going to be the first controversial entry, and it's Sternritter T, the Thunderbolt, Candice Catnip, and the first member of the Bambis to be included on this list. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually think Candice has a really cool suite of abilities, and the Thunderbolt is used in a really nice way. I like the fact that she has a bunch of named attacks like Galvano Blast, Galvano Javelin, and Electrocution, and I think her fight with Ichigo is kind of cool. I especially love the creativity where she breaks her wings off and uses them as swords. That being said, I think this character is mostly just flash over any real substance. I don't think she's that powerful. Out of the Femritters that fight Byakuya, she's the only one to go down and not get back up again during that fight, whereas both Meninas and Lil Toto managed to survive. Not only that, but I'm pretty sure in Can't Fear Your Own World it's actually mentioned that Candice is the weakest out of the lot of them, and to me, that actually does make a lot of sense. She has Kenpachi prone on the ground, and she hits him with a couple of lightning bolts, and he manages to survive. He's literally unable to move, and it doesn't seem to be able to finish him off. So while I like Candice's moveset, I think she is the weakest of the Bambis, and I think that that is reflected in her attacks. They're very flashy, she uses the Thunderbolt in a cool way, but I just don't think they have any real heft behind those moves. Next on the list is another member of the Bambis, and that's Meninas Macallon. Now, Sternritter P, the Power, is not one of my favourite characters in the world, I'll tell you that right now. In my opinion, she's kind of uninspired, and her ability is not that interesting. She basically has superhuman strength, and she can also inflate her muscles to presumably become even more powerful. She uses her ability a couple of times, such as when she crushes a bunch of fodder Shinigami by picking up a row of buildings, which is fairly impressive. But frankly, anyone can kill fodder Shinigami. She also manages to blindside Ichigo and smash his head into a building, but he comes out the other side completely unscathed. She also lands a punch on Kenpachi, but again, he's so severely weakened to that point that it's hard to really say how much impact it actually had. He doesn't move again after that, so that could be attributed to Meninas, but considering he is so weak, It's really hard to say. Now, I put Meninas above Candice because she does survive against Bankai Byakuya, where Candice does get defeated. And I think that, is a point in her favour. She's clearly sturdier than Candice, which is what I think is Candice's real failing. However, she does get her mind taken over by Pepe, and then hits Lil Toto in the face with her enhanced arm, and yet somehow Lil Toto is able to defeat her off screen. That's why I feel pretty comfortable putting Meninas as the second weakest member of the Bambis. Now, next on this list is a Sternritter that I just feel we don't have enough information about his shrift, and that's Sternritter O, the Overkill, Driscoll Bursey. Now, Driscoll is a really weird character because Kubo gave him the honour of being the first villain in Bleach to kill a named hero on screen. Driscoll one-shots Chojuro Sasakibe using his massive Heilig file lances that he can generate, and that's pretty impressive. Not only that, but Driscoll's ability, the Overkill, seems like it's a limitless powerhouse of an ability. Every time he kills anything, that's literally anything, he grows stronger. But I have so many questions about this power. Does that strength continually stack? Or does it eventually drop again over time if he doesn't kill anything for a while? Not only that, but it's interesting that he says that he killed about 100 Shinigami the first time he invaded Soul Society, and then 100 again the second time he invaded, and he still is only beating up Hisagi a little bit. You see Hisagi smash into the wall, yes, but he really isn't that injured. However, I do imagine that had Yamamoto not shown up, and Driscoll's Heilig file connected with Hisagi, it probably would have killed him. It's kind of tough to place Driscoll because he clearly has the power to utterly annihilate vice captains. We don't see him fight a proper captain because Yamamoto is just so absurdly overpowered that he just one-shots him anyway. So again, this is one of those examples where there's just not enough information to reliably rank this guy, but he's clearly above lieutenant level, so I'm happy where he is now. Oh, let's not forget, he's also not the smartest of the bunch, gloatingly going up against Yamamoto that he's going to kill him with his own man's Bankai. Really should have seen how that was going to end for yourself. Now we enter the top 20 of this list, and Sternritter 20 is one of the few to actually not get their shrift revealed, and that's Sternritter K, BG9. BG9 is an interesting character because, again, not enough was answered about this guy. He's a freaking robot. Why is there a robot in the Wandenreich army? Who built this guy? I don't know, Kubo doesn't seem to care. I don't think we're ever going to find out, unless it's fleshed out in the anime. That being said, BG9 is kind of a weird one. He's clearly strong enough to be able to wield Soifon's Jakuho Raikoben as he's able to steal her Bankai in the first place, and when he goes toe-to-toe with her, I think it's quite an interesting little fight. BG9 is cold, analytical, and ruthless, as shown when he attacks Omaida's sister for information. However, his mechanical nature does let him down during the fight, as he's unable to detect Soifon closing in on him at the start of the battle. Not only that, but I feel like BG9 is another one of these examples where it's mostly just flash over any real substance. Yeah, it's pretty cool that he brings out a massive minigun to attack Omaida with, but Soifon breaks the thing in half with pretty much no effort. During his actual fight with Soifon, it's very hard to tell if he ever actually uses his shrift. I've always subscribed to the idea that it's something like the knowledge or the know, which would explain how he knows so much about Soifon at the start, and it would explain his line about acquiring good data on the Mukyu Shunko. Despite putting him at number 20 on this list, I think BG9 is pretty much your average captain level fighter. He's clearly unable to keep up with Soifon's speed, especially in close quarters combat when she lands a hit on him with Mukyu Shunko, and she dodges his tendril when he attempts to swipe at her later on in the fight. He then unleashes a barrage of missiles at her which don't seem to hurt her that much. However, his analytical side does come into play, and he's able to stab her in the wrist to prevent her from releasing her Reiatsu. I always thought that was a really cool little detail, and that was something that he got from the fact that he learned more about her Shunko. The start of BG9's fight is really good, but in my opinion it just ends really nebulously. He detonates himself somehow, which knocks Soifon out, and he's apparently absolutely fine, apart from the fact that his audio receptors are a bit weirded out. But other than that, he's completely fine. So that's really weird. Takes Jakuho Raikoben to the face and survives, albeit with a pretty big hole in his head. But again, it just begs the question as to what this guy actually is. He's clearly a robot of some description, but even a robot shouldn't be able to take a missile to the face. So BG9 is just an enigma that unfortunately I don't think we'll get the answers to, but I'm pretty happy putting him at a sort of average captain class spot. Now, next up on the list, I had a bit of trouble placing this guy. I mean, to be fair, I had a bit of trouble placing a lot of them, but Sternritter N, Robert Akutrone, is an interesting one. I think we can all agree that we started out the arc very impressed with Robert, and he was one of the Sternritter that Kubo gave a lot of spotlight to in the first invasion. It seems like his personality was perfectly suited to fight, and he starts out by going 1-on-1 with Shinsui, who is in Shikai, and just completely decimates him. They have a really nice little skirmish, actually, which I think Kubo did a really good job on to show that Shinsui wasn't completely outmatched. But I also think that Kyoraku's personality was getting the better of him here, and that's actually something I want to make a video on in the future. Needless to say, Robert's speed is really put on show here, as he's able to essentially teleport behind Kyoraku and shoot him in the eye. Not only that, but Robert's speed is showcased later on as well, when he's the only character able to dodge Ichigo's attack, and he also manages to blindside Ichigo as well. Having said that, I don't think Robert's gun is actually that powerful. Yes, it takes out Shinsui's eye, but it was a point-blank shot to the face. He also shoots Kyoraku about 4 times later on in that fight, and as far as we're aware, Kyoraku is basically fine after that. Like I said, Robert's a really weird one. He starts off the arc really impressive, doing all the right things, but later on his personality just seems to change. He becomes whiny, becomes wailing, he becomes frankly considerably less impressive, and is basically never given a chance to do anything again. His Volstendig Grimaniel also never really displays that kind of feat again, and unfortunately Robert gets relegated to just not being that powerful, I think. Next up on the list we have one of my favourite Sternritters, and that's Sternritter I the Iron, Kangdu. It really pains me to put Kangdu at number 18 on this list, but I think it's a fair spot for him. Again, this is a character that Kubo just did not give enough time to and didn't let him shine, as I think he could have been a pretty impressive opponent. Once again, like BG9, he's clearly captain level, he's strong enough to wield Daigoren Hyurin and we actually see him use it as well. Not only that, but he's able to defeat Rangiku off screen without taking a single piece of damage himself. However, for some reason it just goes very downhill very fast for Kang. The moment Hitsugaya gets his Bankai back, he's able to freeze Kangdu with no problem whatsoever, and it's just, I didn't understand it at all, and I still feel so bad for what Kubo did to both Kang and BG9. Kangdu is wailing on Hitsugaya for the entirety of their one chapter fight with all these impressive hand-to-hand moves. None of them are doing anything, by the way, which is really bad. But the moment Hitsugaya goes Bankai properly, Kangdu just falls apart. He does some Shejin Zao move on Toshiro, but it apparently does absolutely nothing. What I hate most about it is just the nebulous way Toshiro freezes him. He just sort of brings his sword up and apparently it's enough to freeze Kang completely. I don't know, it's really weird. The worst part about it is Kangdu is completely fine. When he uses his Volstendig to break out of the ice, he is completely unharmed. But he gets killed off anyway, so again, it's really hard to say if Kang is anything other than an average captain level fighter, and for this list I think it's only fair to place him here when he really hasn't done anything that impressive. I just think that Kubo could have done so much more with this guy, and he clearly had so much more left to give. Next on this list we have my favourite member of the Bambis, Sternritter Z the Zombie, Gisele Jewel. Now, Gisele is one of these characters who really is not a fighter at heart. She doesn't really want to fight, I think. She even says that using her Volstendig tires her out. Admittedly, we do see her attempt a bit of hand-to-hand combat and bow and arrow combat against Ichigo, but it's mostly played up for laughs. Her actual fight against Miuri is a lot more eye-opening. She's actually quite the strategist, and I think she approaches the fight really well. She knows when she has the upper hand, she brings out Bambietta, she brings out Toshiro, she has basically an entire army of 11th Division soldiers at her disposal, and when Hitsugaya is in trouble, it summons the rest of the zombified characters like Kensei, Rose and Matsumoto. I think Gisele does pretty well in that fight, and I think it says a lot about her character. She's smart, she's cunning, and the zombie itself is quite a powerful ability. Now, ranked against other Quincy's, it's not that great because it's actually quite hard to use on a Quincy. She has to actually kill them to do it. But in terms of effectiveness against Shinigami, yes, pretty good. Not only that, but Gisele is also completely immortal, although if she can't physically defeat her opponent, there's not a lot of help that's going to be. I think it was unfortunate for Gisele to come up against Miuri because he is the king of counters. He has a counter for literally everything. For some reason, he has a counter for Bambietta's bombs, despite the fact that I don't think he's ever seen this character before. But, you know, and he also has a counter for Gisele's zombies. So, at the end of the day, she was kind of screwed over by having Miuri as an opponent, but I don't think she's weak at all. I think she's just one of these characters who, she's a puppeteer. She's a puppet master, so she is effectively useless on her own. And that is showcased very well by the fact that Kensei just stabs her in the chest the moment the fight turns the other way. Number 16 on this list is everyone's favourite Sternritter, Pepe Wakabrada. I might get some hate for putting him this high up the list, but Sternritter L the Love is actually pretty dangerous to deal with. I feel like a lot of people really underrate Pepe because of his admittedly horrendous design. I really like how he looks before he goes into his Volstendig. That thing is another thing entirely, but Pepe himself gave off this really cool kind of mystic vibe, and yeah, I think Kubo messed him up completely. That being said, Pepe is definitely a tough customer, and he's able to go one-on-one with a Royal Realm trained Byakuya, and he actually gives him trouble, and bear in mind, this is just after Byakuya has wiped out about 5 Sternritters. It's very clear from the start of this fight that Pepe is in complete control. He uses his love very cleverly to get Byakuya to basically screw over his own Zanpakuto, toe, all the while doing a 2-pronged attack and attacking him with Hisagi at the same time. It's actually a really interesting chapter, and Byakuya is really put on the ropes here, quite literally when Pepe hits him in the back with Love Rope. Byakuya definitely struggles in this fight, whether you like Pepe or not. There's no getting around that. One thing I want to point out that a friend mentioned to me that I had literally never considered before, but is actually really interesting. When Pepe hits Byakuya on the back with the Love Kiss and it does literally nothing to him, I always thought that Byakuya was probably cancelling that out with his own Reiatsu, because Pepe mentions that, oh, Byakuya must not be able to feel love. We know that's not true. So it must be Reiatsu, but it might not be. A friend of mine actually pointed out that it could be Byakuya's Oken clothing acting as a serious defence against Love Kiss, and I actually think that is really cool. Either way, when Pepe activates his Volstendig, Kubo clearly decides to change tack with this character and turns him into a huge joke, and that's basically why he isn't any higher on this list. Despite having a full suite of abilities, Pepe is just tossed aside by Kensei like it's absolutely nothing. It's really, really weird, the tonal shift that happens with Pepe, and I honestly think that, combined with his Volstendig's design, is the main reason for people hating this character. As for me, I don't hate Pepe. I like the fact that he has a consistent theme to his character. Tainted love, he's supposed to be this horrible version of Cupid. But yeah, I think Kubo just threw this character away in the end, and it was a bit of a shame, to be honest, but I think Pepe himself is actually pretty dangerous, and he was almost in control of that fight with Byakuya the entire time. Top 15 now, whew, we are getting there, and now this is one of the ones that I think is pretty weird and very difficult to rank. We have our first Yourself brother, Lloyd. Now, I kind of hate the Lloyd brothers, I'll be completely honest with you. I think their powers, A, don't make any sense, and B, I think the twist with Lloyd is just nonsense. But that's not what we're here to discuss. Let's talk about Lloyd. So, if I'm remembering this rightly, they both have the ability to take on the appearance of somebody else, which obviously Lloyd does. He becomes Kenpachi. But only Lloyd has the ability to take on their powers and abilities, where his brother, Lloyd, can take on their personality and their memories. It's very confusing, especially since the manga itself doesn't seem to lend itself to this idea, but we'll talk more about that when we get to Lloyd. Talking about Lloyd himself, and yeah, I think the blatant weakness with his version of the Yourself is that it takes the form of the character he's facing in that precise moment in time. Basically, what I think that means is if a person is at their weakest and they face Lloyd, he will become that version of them and he cannot improve. Whereas Kenpachi was able to kill him by simply becoming better than the version of him that Lloyd had become. It's obviously a very, very powerful ability, and unlike Berenice and Jerome, who were obviously at the start of this list, Lloyd takes a bit longer for Kenpachi to kill, and I think his ability is inherently more useful and more impressive. Unfortunately for Lloyd, I don't think that this weakness is limited to Kenpachi, although Kenpachi is a great example of the kind of person who would just become stronger. But I think any captain level fighter could really overcome what is essentially a base form version of themselves. Despite that, I think Lloyd is probably a pretty impressive guy to fight Kenpachi like that, and he clearly outlasts his allies. Spot number 14 goes to Lil Toto Lampert, Sternritter G the Glutton. Of all the Bambis, it's pretty obvious that Lil Toto is the smartest of the bunch, and she is also the most level-headed, which I think gives her an enormous advantage over characters like Candice. Now, Lil Toto's ability is a bit too much on the weird side for me. This is pretty much the perfect epitome of the Sternritters having very weird, un-Quincy-like abilities. The fact that her mouth just becomes some massive, strange eating machine is just really weird, but it's undeniably quite powerful. I think in Can't For Your Own World it mentions that she's able to take the abilities of things she eats. That's pretty good. Also, like Menin, she survives against Bankai Byakuya when 3 of the other Sternritter are taken out pretty easily, And Lil Toto is also able to defeat Meninas enough to escape with her life when Meninas tries to kill her. Lil Toto also eats Pepe, and Pepe is visibly terrified of this character despite being in his Volsendig. I think all of this kind of comes together to say quite a bit about Lil Toto in that she probably shouldn't be messed with, because she is actually quite strong, despite maybe not appearing that way to begin with. While her Volsendig might look quite unimpressive and her glutton ability is really, really weird, I think there's no way you can discount Lil Toto as being one of the stronger members of the Sternritter. She's very level-headed, she's very analytical, she knows who she's going into a fight against like Ichigo, and she tempers her expectations on that. And I think it's mostly her personality, combined with apparently an inherent toughness, that kind of puts her this high on the list. Sternritter number 13 is a real favourite of mine, and that is Sternritter F, the Fear, Asnot. Asnot's a weird character. He's really, really hard to rank because his ability is utterly broken. Of all the Shrifts, I think the Fear is definitely one of the most powerful in the series, despite the fact that Kubo attempted to nerf it in his fight with Rukia. Now, we all know Asnot probably best for the way he utterly demolishes Byakuya at the start of the final arc. However, on hindsight, I administer that mostly to the fact that Byakuya had no idea what he was coming up against, and essentially got hit by one of Asnot's thorns, and it was over for him at that point. And that's the problem with Az. His fear ability is so potent that he could hit anyone on this list pretty much, and they would be completely gone. In some ways, it was hard not to put him in the top 10 because his power is just so absurd, especially in his Volsendig Tartar 4-ass. You only need to look at him and he would completely fall under his spell, and we saw that Rukia was about to lose that fight. So why then is Az only 13? Well, there's a couple of things about this character that I think let him down. I think the biggest one is showcased during his battle with Rukia. Asnot is kind of similar to Gisele in the way they let their abilities do the talking, and they themselves are definitely not physical fighters. And it's pretty obvious that when Az's fear stops working against Rukia, he is at a loss for what to do. I think Kubo shows it really well in Az's facial expressions and the way he tries to constantly justify what's going on to himself, but Rukia runs rings around him until he's able to go Volsendig. She cuts his shoulder. He basically just lunges at her at the end of that chapter because he doesn't know what else to do, and Rukia freezes him instantly. So I think with Az, the big drawback is the fact that this guy cannot fight unless he's using his ability. And to be honest, it makes a lot of sense. The flashback shows him as being very ill, and I think that kind of comes forth here, and it shows you that Asnot can't do anything without his power. That being said, don't write him off physically completely. He's able to tank Rukia's Sub-Zero attack, so I think putting him nearer the top of the list is pretty fair for this guy. The next Sternritter on our list is the last of the Bambis and their supposedly self-proclaimed leader, Bambietta Bastabine, or Sternritter E the Explode. Much like Asnot and the other two who stole Bankai before her, she's clearly strong enough to be able to wield a captain's Bankai as she steals Kokujo Tengen Mio. But that's not all. Bambietta's real power, like a lot of these characters admittedly, lies in her Shrift, and the Explode is kind of crazy. It doesn't have much variety and it doesn't have an awful lot of strategy to it, but the destruction that she is able to cause is on such another level that I think she could defeat many of these Sternritter just by simply detonating the entire area. We've seen that by using the Explode, she's even able to overcome Shinji's Sakanade. He attempts to alter her mind, and yeah, she gets messed up for a little while, but she just blows the whole place up, and she's absolutely fine after that, because what can you do against that? Bambietta is a walking missile launcher. She's very, very fast, she can just completely annihilate the area around her, and I don't think it can be understated just how powerful or deadly her bombs actually are. The fact that what she hits becomes a bomb only adds another layer of threat to this character. And then there's her personality. At least while she's alive, during the Komamura fight and before that, she's completely mad. The fact that she can just destroy everything with wanton abandon just shows you that this character cannot be messed with, and that she will destroy everything in her path. And number 11, and at the top of this particular list, is Sternritter J the Jail, Kurge OP. Now, I'll be honest with you, I really considered putting Kurge at number 10, but on reflection, he doesn't quite meet the same threshold as those guys, most of whom are pretty insane. Kurge, on the other hand, is very much the perfect all-rounder Quincy, and he is the perfect introduction to the Wandenreich as a threat. This is because his knowledge of Quincy techniques is apparently incredibly impressive. Of all the Sternritter, he is literally the only one to ever use Ranso Tengai, and the only one to ever use Sclaveray. This, combined with his just general incredible effectiveness at fighting, allows him to defeat Lowly, Menoli, the Tres Bestias, Aeon, and he pushes Ichigo to use Bankai. I remember reading the arc when it was first coming out, and Kurge would not go down. Like, this guy was so hard to defeat, and he fights for quite a while as well. He just completely dominates the Hueco space, and I think that's because of his general effectiveness as a Quincy. Kurge is very interesting in that his jail ability is almost completely useless. Like, this is one of the ones I'm talking about where it's very situational, and yeah, he gets good use out of it, but Kurge fights based on his own power. To me, that's what makes him so impressive. He's a little bit crazy, so I don't think his attitude necessarily helps him too much, but he is also very analytical. Not only that, but he seems to have a mastery over Blut Vein that just, I don't think you really ever see again. Some characters in the Quincy are just immortal, but Kurge breaks his neck back into place after Aeon beats him up, and apparently he's fine. Kurge, in my opinion, was used as the benchmark for all Sternritters. Kubo wrote this guy at the start, and he was like, I'm going to make this guy an absolute beast, just basically to show off the threat that the Wandenreich are. Unfortunately, I don't think many of the Sternritters actually live up to Kurge's example ever again. And in that way, he kind of causes a lot of disappointment. I think it's undeniable, though, that Sclaveray is monstrously overpowered, Kurge's Blut is insane, and this character is just a fantastic way to introduce you to the Wandenreich because he is so powerful, and he is such an all-rounder. Whew, and there you have it. That is my list of Sternritters from 27 through to 11. We'll be doing the top 10 video very soon, I assure you. But let me know in the comments below, guys, what you thought of this list as it stands so far. That's an awful lot of characters to get through. And you can work out, obviously, who is left for the top 10. I'll see if you agree with that as well. Let me know in the comments below, guys, if you agree with me at all on this video. You might not agree with any of it. Please do feel free to leave your own lists in the comments. I'd love to go through them and see what you guys have ranked. But yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. It was quite a lot of work. I think I'm losing my voice. But yeah, I really enjoyed making it. I love talking about the Sternritters and Bleach in general. So like I said, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe. Alright guys, until next time though, until the top 10 video, I'll catch you later. See ya.